If you've ever been in debt, you know the stress, the strain that it puts on you. Well, today on Significant Insights, we're talking about getting out of debt and staying out of debt. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Significant Insights. I'm Jerry Rose. My guest today is bringing hope and help to Christians and non-Christians alike who are in debt. The Bible has a lot to say about money. In Proverbs about debt, it says that the borrower is slave to the lender. As believers, we want to live in freedom, not slavery. Since 2003, my guest, Simon Wilce, has been working to help people find that freedom by helping through the mission of CAP, Christians Against Poverty. CAP is an international ministry that empowers the local church to reach out to those who are in a debt crisis. Simon, I just want to say thank you for taking time to be with me on the program. I had a conversation with a representative of your organization a few days ago and found Christians Against Poverty, the organization you represent, very interesting. So here we are today to talk about it. Before we get into what your organization is about, I would like to talk about debt in general. There's a lot of people are carrying debt today. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, Jerry, let me just say thank you so much for having me on. It's a real privilege to be here and sharing your work and with your viewers. And yeah, what a fantastic question. Debt is really prevalent in our society and around the world. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not originally from the US, but I see debt around the world in a lot of people's lives. So I see three particular things. Number one, and this is what most people assume, is that it's due to consumerism, overspending, wanting what you can't afford, and that definitely exists. I'd say that a much larger percentage is just ordinary people like you and I, where a life event just affects people where they're doing okay, they're managing their finances, and maybe they lose their job, they have a medical emergency, or there is a relationship breakdown, something like that. And what can be manageable just turns into an unmanageable situation and spirals out of control into debt. So that's a big thing we see here at Christians Against Poverty. And then finally, I think we're seeing a new thing happening across the kind of Western world, where we're seeing a lot of people, which we call the working poor, who are working and they have such low incomes and the living costs are so high that it doesn't take much now to slip behind with living costs. And we're seeing a rise in rent arrears, gas arrears, living costs. And again, people just living on the edge. I think there's a Federal Reserve study here in the US which says that a lot of Americans can't even withstand a small $400 finance shock, and things like that just tip families into debt.
It's interesting because there is something to be said, according to some financial experts, about good debt. There's good debt and bad debt. And again, that is controversial because I know some Christian financial advisors who recommend no debt at all. But how do you feel about the idea of there is good debt and there is bad debt?
Yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts on it. I think, I totally buy into thinking around certain aspects of debt that can be useful. So I think around the classic example of buying a home and mortgage debt being good. I mean, for example, I moved to the States 2 years ago and I rent presently. I think I must have put maybe $40,000 into rent over just 2 years. So you can imagine being able to purchase a home and retire debt free would be good. I can imagine as well, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in business and you might need to invest to grow the business. So that again is an example. And even for young people, it's not always a bad thing to invest in your education, as long as you do it well and try and be sensible around your education, and that pays off. So those are examples of good debt where it can be used to invest and grow your wealth and use then those finances for the kingdom. But when I then look at what bad debt is, I always want to make this clarification, because there's a lot of shame around debt and people's finances, and we just want to release that shame amongst people. So I always say that people are not bad. So what could we mean by bad debt then? Well, first of all, I'd say that we bring wisdom, like a lot of other financial organizations, and not to have debt, to be debt free, to live well with your finances is an admirable goal. But we say this, the real bad part of debt and what is bad about debt is when you can't pay it, and when you see families start to fall apart and you see the impact on relationships and children. And that for us is really bad debt. But hey, let's release that guilt and shame and let's strive to live debt free. And there's wisdom in that. So I hope you can hear the nuance in that answer.
So is that what happens when you see with the people that you deal with who have accumulated uh, what I would call uncontrollable debt or badly managed debt?
You've hit the nail on the head there. We call it unmanageable debt. There's a lot of people in the US that have debt that's manageable, and they're paying that off, and it's useful to them. But this group of people, and it is huge in society, where they've slipped into crisis debt or unmanageable debt, and they can no longer meet their living costs. And we at Christians Against Poverty, we see thousands, 20,000 plus families a year go through our systems, and we see the impact on families when they slip into unmanageable debt. Just some stats for you. We see 1 in 4 of the families, when they're in crisis debt, they will regularly skip meals in order to make payments to creditors. We found one lovely lady who, to feel full, she would eat tissue paper to try and feel full so she could make payments to creditors. So we see people not eating. We see 35% of the people and families that come through our programs in local churches are feeling suicidal and have even attempted suicide. And then the stat we're talking about, the biggest cause of relationship breakdowns, probably across the US and in the nations you may be viewing this, are due to financial issues. So we see it as a huge impact, and then you can see the generational impact as a relationship breaks down, the impact on children not growing up with a mum or dad in the same home. So it's a huge thing in people's lives, and something that we can do something about and have a generational impact.
Simon, what about budgeting? How important do you think it is? You know, we were talking about managing your debt, which if you're carrying it, I know a lot of people, my wife and I are included in that group, that we use credit cards a lot for frequent flyer mileage and so forth, but our goal is to pay it off every month. So we try to manage any debt that we have. Budgeting, how important is budgeting as part of that?
Well, as someone who's spent 18 years in this industry now and in mission around budgeting, I'm of course going to say it's very important, Jerry. We've seen some figures. One of our friends over here is the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. They did a study of people in the US and found that 60% of Americans have never done a budget. Now, I think there's 2 reasons for that. I think there's a whole group of people that are quite affluent and therefore don't need to budget to be able to just get through the month. But to those group of people, I say I believe that God really wants you to steward what you've got. So doing a budget and managing, you could maybe give more, you could be intentional with family, you could invest, you can do so much by actively managing what God has blessed you with. And then for the rest of us, maybe that don't have quite as much, it's just so essential to ensure we don't slip behind, that we plan well for life, that we don't end up in that crisis debt ourselves, so that we can live good lives. So I say it's essential. And yeah, here at CAP, we run our money management course, the CAP Money course, and we have 3 simple sayings when we're looking at our finances, which is cut back, cut out, cut costs. And what that means is look for areas of your life where you can cut out and cut back, maybe do less of something, cut something out altogether, or just do it cheaper. And there's ways to manage our finances, get on top of them, and live the life that God is calling us to.
More with my guest about money and debt right after this.
In 1996, his career was back on track and things were looking good, and yet God convicted him and said, you need to do something about families that were struggling just like you. So he took the knowledge that he had, he gave up a really well-paying job and stepped out with the equivalent of $10 in faith to start this ministry. And
Welcome back. Today we're talking about getting out of debt with Simon Wilce, Director of Operations for CAP, Christians Against Poverty. Let's talk about Christians Against Poverty, the organization of which you're a part. It really has been predominant in the UK. I think it started, if I'm correct, in the UK. And it's just now beginning to come to the United States. If I'm correct, how did it get started?
Yeah, well, I find this ministry really exciting. Like I say, I've been involved 18 years now, and we're actually celebrating about this month our 25th year anniversary of being going. And our story is one of our founder's story. So an amazing guy, a really good friend of mine called Dr. John Kirkby. He's now CBE, which is Commander of the British Empire. I know you guys in America, that means nothing, but he got to meet the Queen and really be recognized for his work in the UK. And his story was back in the late 80s, early 90s. He was a very successful businessman on the outside in the UK, all wealth trappings and entrepreneur, very American style story. And in the middle of a recession, he basically lost everything. He didn't live well, he didn't know Jesus. And he lost his job. He ended up in thousands of dollars equivalent of debt. His house was repossessed and his marriage crumbled. And he ended up living in just a small room with two young children, being hounded by debt collectors and abandoned by friends. And this really is where our DNA comes from and our founding story. It was in the middle of that desperation that a pastor reached out to John and started to take care of his family, just showed the love of Jesus in action, helped feed his children, invited him around for community, and then really boldly and clearly explained the gospel to John. So John radically gave his life to Jesus in 1992, and then God rebuilt his life over the next 4 years. John often says, he said, I'm the worst baby Christian that had ever existed, but that's what discipleship is all about. And in 1996, his career was back on track and things were looking good, and yet God convicted him and said, you need to do something about families that were struggling just like you. So he took the knowledge that he had, he gave up a really well-paying job and stepped out with the equivalent of $10 in faith to start this ministry. And when I say we started small, I mean we really started small. We started in his bedroom office. He just went out and looked for a few families to help them. And from those small beginnings, that seed of faith, God has grown this ministry into a huge nationwide Christian ministry in the UK, 300 staff in our head office, 1,500 staff across the nation in churches. And then it's our network of churches, 500 churches running our projects into the local community, local church being the hero because it was a local church that showed John the way in those first and early days. And we've actually got our story written into a book called Nevertheless, which was our founders saying at the time because it was such a difficult journey to grow this ministry. And we'd love to offer anyone in the US a free copy of John's book. I'll just show you here. It's an amazing story of faith. It'll inspire you in your own journey and is a great ministry tool as well around finances and debt. So if anyone wants to get on our website, that's capamerica.org, and you can find out a little bit about our journey with a free resource and be encouraged in your walk as well.
So Simon, is CAP in other countries or is it just in the UK and now being introduced in America?
Well, it really has grown into a movement of God. So from those small early beginnings, we then launched in Australia 20 years ago now. We launched in New Zealand in 2008. I had the privilege of moving over there and helping pioneer and lead the work, and it's now a nationwide ministry there as well. Canada in 2013, and then we took the step of faith to bring it to the US a couple of years ago, landed in the Chicagoland area, got our first few churches, walking by faith to get these projects up and running, reach families here. And we always say there's lots of amazing things going here in the US, and we've just got a real thing to bring local church around caring for low-income families, the lost and the least, going to families in their community, sharing the gospel.
So now tell me how it works. You work through churches, but do you have expert teams of financial experts who work with these churches, or how does it happen?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question. And so I'll start at that DNA just a little bit again. So it's all about the local church being equipped. We're here to equip them with these projects. And we're also really gospel focused. So evangelism is really important to us. Our chair here in the US is a guy called Kevin Palau, the son of Luis Palau. So the Palau Association has been really influential in helping us get up and going, because we want to equip churches to do effective evangelism to the least. So when a church partners with CAP, we do two things. One is our really simple financial literacy course, which is the CAP Money Tour, and it's designed as a bridge to the community. It's run in coffee shops. We have one church that is running it for women transitioning out of prison and helping them re-enter society and getting the financial skills they need. So we simply equip the church, train up some trainers, give them the tools. They've got some really simple tools, and then they work with people in groups and classrooms and one-on-one to equip them with financial skills. So that's the CAP Money course. And we've got quite a few churches now running it, some influential churches in the Chicagoland region and around the nation. And then the big thing we do is our rescue service, and this is our debt help centers. This is where we have a worker in a local church, maybe working a couple of days a week, and we kind of call them missionaries to the local community, dressed up as financial helpers. They go out and visit families in their home on behalf of the church and CAP. They assess the situation. They see there's no food in the cupboards, that the relationship is breaking down. They counsel, they bring food around, and then CAP brings in this amazing credit counseling operation we have at our head office and offers professional services to the least to bring them a plan of action to get debt free and assist them along the way, talking to creditors if we need, but it's all to help people get towards their own debt-free moment and get families back on their feet and share the gospel.
So, is this for any size church, or would it just be for larger churches that would have the people resources, the human resources, to have some sort of financial expertise to be able to go into homes and talk to people and to help them?
Well, the beauty of the CAP ministry is that we do all of the financial piece. So we just want really great people as the volunteers, and we train them up how to deliver our advice and all of that kind of thing. So that frees up churches to do this ministry at any scale. And our smallest church here in the US and around the world is probably a church of about 60 people, 60 adults, and they can take on the ministry, and they've decided this is their one big piece to reach their community. And then we have bigger churches, 4,000 or 5,000 strong out here in the US, medium churches. I think our biggest church around the world is a 20,000 strong church. They're running it through all their campuses. We fit in wherever a church is at. And our real big cry for this nation here in the US is we want those churches. We want to reach new communities, resource more churches all the time. So reach out to us again at capamerica.org. That's capamerica.org. /partner, and you can find out how your local church can get involved at any size to make an impact on their community.
You can find out more about Christians Against Poverty by going to www.capamerica.org. Final thoughts right after the break.
And all the shame you feel, many people make mistakes. There, by the grace of God, go I. So don't feel that shame. It happens to lots of people. And the thing you need to do is to not bury your head in the sand, but to reach out to good people who will help you and to put in the work with them to get yourself back on your feet. People do want to help, and there is hope.
Jesus said, no one can serve two masters. We can't serve both God and money. When you're in debt, worry about money can consume you and can become your master. Christians Against Poverty is committed to helping people master their money through education and practical intervention with help from the local church. Here are some final thoughts from Simon Wilce of CAP. What about people watching the program today who someone would say, hey, I'd like to get this in my church, or someone who would say, I really need this kind of financial help. First of all, what about the person who says, this sounds very interesting, I'd like to get this in our church? What do they do?
Again, those two groups of people do exist. And so for people that sat there interested in saying, I want to get involved, I want to get the book, I want my church to be running this, again, on our website, there is a place where you can fill in a contact form, a church inquiry pack. And then we do things like this all the time. It's beautiful in this new age where we just get online with pastors, we share the heart and vision, we put in the work to really envision churches, we do events in the Chicagoland area or virtual events. So we're here to equip churches, leaders, to bring them on a journey, see the needs in their community. And that's how people can contact us and how we can find new friends for the ministry. And then, of course, there will be people sat watching this that are saying, hey, I'm actually struggling in debt. What can you do to help me? So the truth is, we're a big ministry, that we're around the world in those countries. If you happen to be watching in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or the UK, you can check out our websites in those nations. In the US, we're a relatively small Chicagoland region right now. So we may be able to help you if you're in this area. But my message to you is that there is hope, and that if you need to reach out, we can redirect you if we can't help you ourselves. But if not, we will make sure that we can do everything we can to support you in that situation.
Well, if I understand it correctly, the goal is to get this all across the United States and churches all across the United States to reach out to people to help. What about people who are watching right now and they're feeling that they're so deep in debt and so deep in depression frequently about this, that there's no hope? How do you respond to those people, Simon?
Well, I think in this ministry, although we get people debt free, we get families back on their feet, the biggest thing we do for people is we bring back hope into those situations. In fact, one of our straplines is always hope, because when you're in financial crisis, one of the things that we hear time and time again is families say to us, I feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. They can't see a way out. So my message to listeners, whether we can help you or someone else out there, is you are not beyond the redeeming power of Jesus Christ. You are not beyond his help. There is hope for you. There is a plan to get you debt free. And all the shame you feel, many people make mistakes. There, by the grace of God, go I. So don't feel that shame. It happens to lots of people. And the thing you need to do is to not bury your head in the sand, but to reach out to good people who will help you and to put in the work with them to get yourself back on your feet. People do want to help, and there is hope.
Simon, thank you for joining me. It's an incredible organization, and I wish you the best in the United States with the same kind of success that you've seen in the UK and other parts of the world. Thanks again for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jerry.
One of my favorite scriptures when I think of a balanced financial life as a Christian is in Proverbs, the 30th chapter, 8 and 9. Here's what it says: keep falsehood and lies from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. I think the thing we need to understand is that money is neither bad nor good. It's how we use it. And if we think in terms of everything that God gives us, we're stewards of, then we think in terms of managing that well, but keeping a good, solid balance. And I think the whole question here, the whole answer to our finances is this scripture: Lord, give me enough to make sure that I can honor you in everything that I do and everything that I say in my life. Thank you for watching today. God bless you.